Well, yesterday, President Cyril Ramaphosa suspending the National Police Commissioner, Fani Masemola, as a precaution. He appointed an acting National Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Puleng Dimpane, making that announcement at the Union Buildings, along with the acting Police Minister, Firoz Cachalia, both the Minister and the National Commissioner now in an acting capacity. Well, a pleasure to welcome Professor Firoz Cachalia, the acting Minister, to the show today. Minister, good afternoon to you, and thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon, Wendy, and good afternoon to your listeners.
So we have an acting national commissioner now. We have an acting minister. I know this is something that was raised at the press conference yesterday, but are you comfortable with assuring the country that we have a stable police structure in the country with all that we're seeing at the Madlanga inquiry, an acting commissioner, an acting minister? Is everything okay?
Well, of course, everything's not okay when one listens to the evidence that is being led. Excuse me, Soma, in the Madlanga Commission, and the steps we're having to take to restore integrity and accountability in the police service. I think. The decision that the President made yesterday with respect to the appointment of an acting national commissioner was the right one in the circumstances. I don't think, given the manner in which the national commissioner, Commissioner Masemola, has had to, in effect, step down, would justify making a long-term decision right now. So I think that the decision to appoint General Dimpane to act is also the right one, following the precautionary suspension. We are in a moment when a lot of decisions will be made to deal with what we've now come to call consequence management in the country. So there are positions that we can't fill once people have been suspended. There are vacancies, and I think one of the tasks I have with the newly appointed acting national commissioner is to look at the resourcing issues, the human resource issues in SAPS in the current moment, and I've asked General Nkua to provide me with a report, which is already done. It's just it now needs to be carefully considered in the coming weeks.
The SAPS Act only provides for the suspension of the National Commissioner once there is an appointment of a board of inquiry into his fitness. The President didn't announce an inquiry into his fitness. So how does it work with a precautionary suspension? Is it still lawful?
Well, there are two questions, perhaps, from a legal point of view that need to be considered. The first is whether and to what extent the National Commission in these circumstances would have been entitled to audi alteram. I can indicate that the President had conversations with the National Commissioner. They had discussions and they reached agreement about the way forward. So there's no issue there. And then with respect to the appointment of a board of inquiry, President hasn't excluded that option. But let me point out that when those provisions were drafted, this situation was not contemplated. What is the situation? This is a situation in which there's an ongoing judicial process. And respectfully, I would say that it would not make sense to invoke such a provision when there is a judicial process that hasn't come to a conclusion. What would the board do? How would the board determine the fitness or otherwise of any national commissioner in these circumstances, one who is facing a judicial process and charges and so forth? So that was also considered, and I think that the best decision in the circumstances was made. But if you recall, that when asked about this matter yesterday, the president did say that he hasn't excluded that option as the situation unfolds. Yeah.
We have an acting commissioner now, and it's so difficult when you have such a deeply factionalized police service. You know, how do you choose a commissioner? Which side do they fall on? So some concerns being raised about the acting commissioner, Lieutenant General Puleng Dimpane, and her testimony at the ad hoc committee regarding pushing for the disbandment of the PKTT. So how does that decision get made, and how do you ensure that that person doesn't fall on one side or the other?
Look, in the current environment, this kind of decision is obviously a difficult and complicated one. In fact, I would say that one of the considerations that informed at least my thinking about the matter in my conversations with the president is that I have no reason to believe that General Dimpane is involved in any factional fight. I have indicated publicly that I have good reason to believe that she's an independent-minded person. I've seen that on many occasions in the decisions that she's made. Now, the fact that she had a particular view based on financial considerations about the future of the PKTT, it can't be inferred from that she had a factional view. What can be inferred from that is that she had a view, and the question is whether that view was informed or not. And I think that she was perfectly correct to raise questions about the ongoing resourcing of the PKTT. So I don't think it can be inferred from that she's a factionalist.
Overall, Minister, obviously watching the Madlanga inquiry, I'm very much in favour. I think sunlight is the best disinfectant, and this is a process we need to go through in order to restore the credibility and trust of the police service. But how worried are you about the trust relationship that South Africans have got with police at the moment?
Well, I'm very worried about that. I'm also worried about the morale of the police officers or the members of the South African police service who are trying to do a job, who are committed to fighting crime. And from where they're sitting, they're watching the situation at the top of uncertainty and, frankly, of factionalism, apparently, and of malfeasance. This is not what the ordinary members of the police service want to see in their leadership. And my message to the leadership, who should not all be tarred with the same brush, is that they have a responsibility to assist, to ensure that we are able to restore their trust. Unfortunately, I think the reality is that we are going to have to walk through this difficult period. We need to do it to understand the depths of the problems and to identify what the remedies are. I don't have the time to dwell on problems, in a way that's disempowering. I've been given a job to do. I have to focus on the way ahead, on what needs to be done, to focus on what needs to be done. And that's what I'm going to do. I have no, I don't feel, of course, there are times when I feel a little bit puzzled, actually, by the extent of the evidence being led before the Madlanga Commission. But I don't feel despair. I don't feel that that would be the right attitude for the country. Let's work together now that we understand the problems that we're facing as a society, because that is what the Madlanga Commission is doing. It's putting us as a country, as a people, to understand the problems that we've had with policing, to understand what has led us to this point, and to then think about what needs to be done to build a professional, competent police service in the next decade, one that serves our people well.
Minister, thank you so much for your time. It's the Acting Minister of Police, Professor Firoz Cachalia, speaking to us.